Thank you, Rex. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Excuse my voice, it usually gets better as I talk. But I'm here for a couple of reasons. One is I got married about a year and a half ago, and I've been living in New York for the last 35 years, but I moved out here, so I'm now about 30 miles from here. I got a call from Rex, who is modest despite appearances, but he is he's the best known and the most knowledgeable attorney in the state in terms of fighting the oil industry. He has been obsessed with bringing the oil industry and the natural gas industry in this state to standards and bringing them into compliance with the law. Oh, he called me, and Brian Panish, who is famous for every class action litigator, and John Morgan's law firm, John Morgan, who's the biggest law firm in this country. When they told me about the case, the first thing I said to them is, this is precisely my wheelhouse. And Rex said, that's what I said when I heard about this case, this is in your wheelhouse. But also because of this team. There's a lot of class action litigators out there that will sign up clients and then they don't know how to litigate lawsuits. If the case doesn't settle, if the case settles, then everybody does okay. If the case doesn't settle, they won't litigate it. And I'm a litigator. I teach students. I've been for 30 years teaching students how to litigate environmental litigation. I run the environmental litigation clinic at Pace University Law School in White Plains, New York. I actually commute 2 days a week back to New York to teach my course. I teach my students, I give them forced polluters to sue at the beginning of the semester. We have a special court order that allows them to practice law under my supervision as if they were attorneys. They go to court, they argue their case. If they don't win the case, they don't pass the course. And we've brought over 500 successful cases since I started that litigation clinic at Pace, and we've cleaned up the Hudson River. And I'm proud that I'm a litigator. I know who the good litigators are, and I love being involved with Brian Panish because he actually likes to litigate the case. Most lawyers, even the good litigators, would rather settle the case, but he likes a fist fight, and I'm very proud to be involved in this case with him and with Rex and John Morgan and the rest of the team. I went down to Highlands today and to Porter Estate, walked the streets and talked to people who I met, and it's an extraordinary story for me because I ran into a Korean woman who was wearing a mask, spoke very little English. When I said about the gas, she said, yes, I vomit, my children vomit. We talked to a young boy who was pulling into one of the gates, probably an 18-year-old kid and his sister, and they recognized me when they pulled up and got out, and we took a picture together. They said their little brother was chronically sick since the gas started. They said in his school, which if you look at that picture of the gas hovering over the community, it's right over the Porter Elementary School. Mm-hmm. Oh, and he said that in his brother's school, that the children are not allowed to leave the classrooms during the daytime, that they can't go out and have recess. Oh, and he said, and they told me that their younger brother and many of the people have left the community. Other people are getting nosebleeds, they're getting respiratory infections, they're getting eye infections, they're getting abdominal pain, and all of these other illnesses that are associated in the medical literature with the gases that are being released here. The gases, as Dr. Rosenberg told you, are benzene, methane, toluene, xylene, ethylbenzene, benzene, radon, or captains. Some of these are mutagenic, They're carcinogenic, some of them. They're teratogenic, which means that they cause miscarriages. Mutagenic, they cause birth defects. And hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, particularly in very, very high levels. And here it's hundreds of times over the maximum level that in this community, you know, where we measured it's 183 part per million. The state limitation is 0.03 parts per million. So it's hundreds of times higher than California allows. And you know, I was there with a realtor, and she said, well, first of all, we were there with an engineer as well. The engineer explained how this pipe is working, because when I originally heard about this, I thought the gas was coming out of the wellhead and then rolling down on the community. But she said, no, it's coming out at 9,000 feet, and then it's percolating through the ground and through the geology, and it's dispersing. And it's 2 miles deep. Oh, it's dispersing very widely, and it's coming up not just out of the mountain, but it's coming up through people's basements, and in their living rooms, and in their bedrooms, and in their nurseries, and they're breathing this gas. That's a poison gas. And you know, she said to me, this pipe, I said, how come they don't have concrete seal? I know the law in this state, you have to have a concrete casing right down to the storage dome. But they don't have that in this. They have it down the first 500 feet and the last 4,000 feet, but there's 6,000 feet in there with no casing on it. Oh, and I said, how were they allowed to do this? And she said, well, they were grandfathered in. That's their argument. This pipe is 62 years old. It was built in 1954. That's the year I was born. And I can tell you, things fall apart. 62. Right? It's a metal tube. It's a metal tube going through a geological borehole. And the metal tube is going to rust. Everybody knows that. This had to happen. This was bound to happen. And that's what, when Rex tells you this is a time bomb, he's not saying it's going to explode. What he's saying is that there's 98 other wells there, and they're all built the same way. They're rusting. And of course they're going to blow at some point. Of course they are. The gas company knew that. And they had to make a calculation. Do we want to go down? Do we want to build a new well and do it right the way the law requires, which the law in California and the federal law, the Safe Drinking Water Act, which was passed in 1974, says that the concrete has to go all the way down to the top of the storage dome. So if it's 9,000 feet, it's got to go 9,000 feet of concrete, concrete casing, and then a metal tube in the middle. They didn't do that here. So they took a shortcut, and they knew this was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen because it's just physics. You know, they're not arguing with me. They're arguing with the oxidative process. Things rust. And that's what was, and they knew this had to happen. And now you have a community, and you know, I've brought over 500 lawsuits, successful lawsuits. I brought some that weren't successful. I don't talk about those. I brought over 500 successful environmental lawsuits, and I was trying to think as I listened to these people talk today. You know, when was the last time I actually saw an environmental catastrophe, crisis like this one, where there's an immediate health impact to children? You don't see that. You know, we saw it in Bhopal. We see it in some other places, but here, you know, in October 23rd, this thing blew. And 2 weeks later, kids' noses started bleeding. And, you know, we were there with a realtor, and she was pointing to these houses and shaking her head. She's one of the biggest realtors in this area, and one of the biggest real estate company in the country. And she was saying, she was shaking her head. when this kid was talking to us and saying a lot of these houses are abandoned now, these $1 million houses. And she said, you know what, this is a recipe for a default desert, because she said, none of these houses are worth the value that we're paid for them. And a lot of them are probably underwater. Somebody paid $1.2 million for a house and they got an $800,000 mortgage. And that house now is worth $500,000 at best. The speculators are gonna come in here and buy them, risking whether they clean this thing up. And then as people abandon the houses, all the values drop. So even if you hold on to it, your house, your values are gonna drop because everybody's dropped, and then everybody's gonna sell it at once at the end. You know, they're all gonna come on the market at the same time, even if the best happen. So, you know, you have this assault on property, you have poison gas in the community, you have children getting sick, you have adults wearing masks and vomiting. You have people who are trying to get out, and 1,000 people who have not been allowed to leave. So, and then the people who do leave are not put in comparable value housing. That's what the gas company owes you. If you're driving a Cadillac and somebody destroys it because of negligence, you don't say, okay, give me a Volkswagen back. You want the Cadillac and you're entitled to it. But that's not what they're doing. They're jamming these people into hotel rooms where their lives are going to deteriorate and their quality of life is going to deteriorate. They need to put them in houses that are comparable to the houses they left, and they need to do it immediately. And there's a whole process for doing this. We've seen it done all over the country. We know how to do it. If this was Point Doom, it would have been done. If this was Santa Barbara, it would have been done, because people have the political connections. And my question was, when I heard about this stuff, my question was, where is the government? Where is the state of California? Why have they not declared a state of emergency for this community the way they did with flood victims, other crises? Why don't they have the state mechanism and FEMA in here relocating people? And why is it that when you want to move your kid into another school, that you can't do that in 10 minutes, right? I mean, if you think your child is unsafe, you have a right to move them to a different school. And the governor should have been down here on day one saying, we are going to make it so that the surrounding school districts will take these children and make sure that if they want to go back later, they can go back later. But if their parents want to get them out today, they need to be able to get out today. We don't need, and it is immoral for us to keep children in a place where poison gas is causing them nosebleeds. And nosebleed, it does not happen easily. It is a canary in the coal mine for other things that are happening inside that child. And, I started doing my working for commercial fishermen on the Hudson River in a little village called Crotonville, New York. And the people in there were not wealthy. They were working people. They were carpenters, laborers, factory workers, electricians, commercial fishermen. And they saw their livelihoods being destroyed by pollution. The oil companies were dumping oil. A company was dumping oil into the Hudson River, and it blackened the beaches and made the shad taste of diesel. So they couldn't be sold at Fulton Fish Market in New York City. And people were getting sick from the fumes, and the beaches were blackened. And this was, to them, these were people who were not flying every Christmas to Yosemite or Yellowstone or the national parks. For them, the environment was their backyard. It was the bathing beaches, the swimming holes, the fishing holes of the Hudson. This was their livelihood. It was their property values. These properties were lifetime investments for them. And they saw it being destroyed. And they actually came together in an American Legion Hall, a room about half the size. There were 300 people in that room, and they started talking about, most of them were Marines, because this community had a lot of Marines in it. They started talking about blowing up pipes on the Hudson and rolling mattresses up and jamming them up the pipes to flood the rail yard with its own waste. And a guy came to that meeting and said to them, and he was the outdoor editor of Sports Illustrated. He was a great fly fisherman, and he had written an article about fishing in the Hudson, and he had discovered an ancient navigational statute called the 1888 Rivers and Harbors Act. This was in 1966. It was before we had the Safe Drinking Water Act, before we had the Clean Water Act. And this statute, this 1888 statute, said it was illegal to pollute any waterway in the United States. You had to pay a big penalty if you got caught, but also there was a bounty provision that said that anybody who turned in the polluter got to keep half the fine. And he came to this meeting when they were all talking about violence, and he said to them, he showed them a copy of the law, and he said, we shouldn't be talking about breaking the law, we should be talking about enforcing it. And they resolved that they were going to start a group that was then called the Hudson River Fishermen's Association. They were going to go out and track down and prosecute every polluter on the Hudson. And they 18 months later, they collected the first bounty in United States history under this 19th century statute, and then they sued every polluter on the Hudson, and they won the lawsuits, and they cleaned up the river, and they hired me using bounty money in 1984, and since then we brought over 500 cases and forced polluters to spend $5 billion remediating the Hudson. But one of the things they taught me was that we're not protecting the environment for the sake of the fishes and the birds so much. We're protecting it for our own sake. Because we recognize that nature is the infrastructure of our communities. And that if we want to meet our obligation, which all of us do, we want communities that work. We want to meet our obligation as a generation and a civilization and to give our children communities and to provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and safety and good health as the communities that our parents gave us. And if we want to do that, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure, which is our air and our water and wildlife and fisheries, the shared resources of our society. Well, Southern California gas protected it, or didn't care about its infrastructure. That's all it was concerned about. Is this infrastructure going to last to protect our gas load? But when it was assessing that cost, it was not thinking, well, if it blows, we're going to lose some gas, but also it's going to do horrendous damage to the surrounding communities. And you think about it, if a terrorist put poison gas into your neighborhood and destroyed your property value and sicken your children, we would definitely have police action. Right?
Yeah.
So why do the oil companies get off? What's the difference? Sometimes what you'll hear from government officials who are charged with enforcing the law is you hear, well, environmental law is not real law. It's just protecting nature. It's not really have anything to do with us. But environmental law is real law, and when you break an environmental law, there are real consequences, there are real victims, and there are real injuries. And if somebody puts hydrogen sulfide into the air, which can cause brain damage, or radon and ethylbenzene and benzene, which causes cancer, and a pregnant woman gets that in her system, and I'm sure there are pregnant people in that community, or a little child and maybe loses some IQ points. That little girl gets into 5th or 6th grade and she can't solve a math problem the way that she's supposed to, or she can't read as easily as she's supposed to. And God gave her a brain to solve that problem and to read that book, but the gas company took it away from her. And that is a crime. And that is a crime as serious as any crime. It's assault and battery, child abuse, to steal the health of a little child, and to steal their aspirations, and to degrade the property that they're supposed to inherit, and to and to shrink their world like that, and their self-esteem, and all those other things that go with good health. And that's a crime. It's as bad a crime as you can commit. And with these chemicals, with radon, benzene, methylbenzene, they kill people. They cause brain tumors, and they cause colon tumors, and they cause lung cancer. Radon is the greatest cause of lung cancer in people who don't smoke cigarettes. If you know somebody who didn't smoke and got lung cancer, the chances are they got it from radon. And that is one of the gases, the poison gases that are being released in this community. These gas companies, I fight them all the time. And what they say is, well, this is free market capitalism. We live in a free market, we can't have too much regulation. And they say, and they said, what they've been saying is, well, we were complying with the regulations. Well, yeah, you were complying with the regulations because you wrote the regulations. Because we know this, anytime you see large-scale environmental injury like this, you will see the subversion of democracy. You will see the corruption of public officials by the polluter. You'll see the capture of the agency that is supposed to regulate the polluter becomes a sock puppet for the industry it's supposed to regulate. And if somebody ever tells you, well, they were complying with Dogger's regulation, well, yeah, that's because Dogger works. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Southern California Gas. And the polluters, and Southern California, why is the government not down here raising alarms? Well, maybe it's because Southern California Gas last year contributed $500,000 to Democratic and Republican politicians in the state, including $30,000 to the governor, whose sister sits on the board. Of course, we can't expect those agencies to protect us. And that's why, luckily, we have the courts, and we have attorneys, and in this room, you have the best attorneys to be able to handle that case. And I'm looking forward to fighting this case, to fighting this company, to winning it, and to getting justice for the people, and particularly the little children in this community, who deserve to understand that even if they are injured by a large corporation or a large polluter, that there's justice in this country, and they're going to see that justice, and they're going to believe in America, and they're going to believe in our country. And we owe that to our children, you owe it to yourselves, and we're going to help you achieve that. We're not going to be working for you, we're going to be working with you. And we're going to make sure that this gas company pays everything that we can get out of them to reimburse you for the injury that you've suffered because of their negligence and their malfeasance. And we can't count on the politicians and their indentured servants in Sacramento, but we can get justice from the courts, and we're going to try to help you get that. Thank you very much.